Well, the NFC North is looking for a new face now that Aaron Rodgers, who's been with the Packers since Moby Dick was a minnow, is off to New York. And Minnesota, well, they topped the division in 2022, but the Pythagorean theorem doesn't lie. I'm going to explain that in just a second. All right, I covered the Lions for 10 years. I've been cynical about the Lions. I've been pragmatic about the Lions. But I am telling you, the statement I'm about to make is utterly sincere. I actually think the Lions are going to win the NFC North. Now, the odds tell us that, plus 130. And why would I say that? Well, the Lions went 9-8 in 2022 after finishing 3-13 the year before. They had a tie in there as well. And they were one of the NFL's most improved teams last year. They got a young team. They're cultivating a real culture, something they truly have not had for a long time. It's a hard-nosed culture. The players, it's not just hyperbole. They'll run through a brick wall for this coach. And if you're being honest and accurate, few teams were more productive on offense than the Lions were in 2022. They produced the fourth most yards and the fifth most points per game. They consistently came up with touchdowns when they needed them. They ended up trading DeAndre Swift to Philadelphia, but they drafted Jahmyr Gibbs to replace him. He's a three-down back. You've also got David Montgomery as a second option. You've got balance. The problem last year was Detroit's defense. That prevented the team from winning more games. That side of the ball, last year, they allowed the most yards per game, the fifth most points per game, and they let opponents convert third downs with the third best percentage in the game. That's not a formula for winning. However, the Lions have improved on defense. This is real. They signed a couple of free agents, Emmanuel Mosley and Cameron Sutton. They drafted a rookie, Jack Campbell, a great tackler, Brian Branch, and I will tell you, Malcolm Rodriguez from Oklahoma State, he'll be back on the field, a huge surprise at linebacker week one as a sixth-round draft choice. Yeah, I realize winning a title is a lot to ask from a young team that I understand has a history of underperforming. No one knows better than me. They won one playoff game since 1957. January 5th, 1992, and they beat the Cowboys 38-6. John Madden on the call that day, he said, you're looking at the two teams of the 90s. And he was half right. The Cowboys went on to win 3 Super Bowls. The Lions didn't win another playoff game, although they did get to the playoffs 4 more times. Which brings me back to the Vikings, who are 3-1, and I will explain the Pythagorean theorem. The Vikings, as successful as they were last year, they gave up more points than they scored. And yet, look at their record. What were they? 13-4? 14-3? Something like that? That doesn't happen. I a year ago sat in this chair and warned Raiders fans that the Pythagorean theorem would bite the Raiders fans after their performance from the 2021 season, which they made the playoffs. They came back to earth. They went 6-11. I'm not saying the Vikings are going 6-11, but based on what happened last year, according to the Pythagorean theorem, which has to do the points scored versus points allowed and the relative win-loss based on years of statistics going back 25 years, the Vikings should have probably been 8-9 last year, but they had a very prolific offense. They took a gamble in the draft by drafting a wide receiver from USC, Jordan Addison, with the 23rd pick, former Blitnikoff Award winner. See, and the reason I say they took a gamble is because they have other needs on the roster. But you put him, you insert him as a wide receiver into that group that already has Player of the Year Justin Jefferson. Well, that leaves Kirk Cousins and the passing game in very good position to have real success offensively this year. But, again, that dreaded word defense again. The same defensive issues that plagued Detroit greatly affected Minnesota. As a matter of fact, Detroit pounded Minnesota in a game last year. The Vikings allowed the second most yards and the fifth most points per game to all their opponents, and they found themselves in close games in spite of having tremendous offensive firepower. So, Minnesota, they were 13-4. I should have remembered that, but excuse me. Now, despite allowing 3 more points than they scored, they managed to be 13-4. So, you combine that statistic, which I don't know what the Vikings did to change things dramatically around this year on defense. You lose Dalvin Cook. The roster isn't getting any younger. That's why the Vikings are not favored to win the division. Not saying they can't, I just don't think they will. Which brings us to the Chicago Bears. A lot of people think the Bears could be a sleeper team for 2023. I'm not buying it. Now, I realize Justin Fields narrowly missed out on the single-season record for rushing yards by a quarterback, but you don't want that. You want your quarterback to operate from the pocket. If you're able to keep plays alive with your feet, I get it. But you don't want a college version of a dual-threat quarterback where your default mechanism is to run. So their offense was okay last year, not great. The Bears picked to finish third. They're plus 325. It means you bet $100, and the Bears win the division. You win $325. Okay? Fields has more weapons this year. He has more structure. They traded with Carolina to get DJ Moore, and they took Darnell Wright, a tackle, the 10th pick in the draft. Chicago also made a splash in the free agent market. They agreed to terms with Tremaine Edwards. He was a big cog in the Buffalo Bills defense the last few years, and his teammate T.J. Edwards was also one of the better, higher-rated players in Pro Football Focus for linebackers. So the Bears picked up some assets. No team, though, sacked the quarterback fewer times than the Bears. They need a pass rush. Maybe these guys can help. Their secondary is not great, but they did address both units in the draft. They have a good, above-average linebacking core. But 2 words, Justin Fields. The team will begin and end on his fortunes. We shall see if he is able to play the position with what NFL requires. Playing the position with your eyes. Justin Fields is a solid citizen, good person, a leader. He has the requisite skills. But when the game starts, recognition, it's a position you play with your eyes. You make mental snapshots, you execute. And if your default mechanism is to whirling dervish run every time, it's not going to end well for the Bears this year. So let's see if he can fix that. Packers, the longer shot in the division, although they're all kind of bunched together. 4-1's not a real long shot. 30-year run, nice 3 decades, even though 2 Super Bowls is better than 0, but not what I think the Green Bay faithful would like. They went 30 years of having a Pro Bowl caliber quarterback under center every single Sunday. Maybe they took it for granted. Some guy named Brett Favre, who departed in 08, and now Aaron Rodgers is off to New York, which is coincidentally what Favre did. So now Jordan Love. This is a pick that became very polarizing, split the fan base. We're going to find out this year if Green Bay, they were village idiots for doing this, or it was a stroke of genius. No hiding anymore. I have no idea if Jordan Love can pull this off. None. They say, well, you don't know what he can do. They know exactly what he can do. They see him in practice every day. Trust me. And you saw a couple of his starts. He shows okay in flashes. Once they get more film on, I don't know. Let's let it play out. Because the Packers offense, even under Aaron Rodgers, stagnated in 2022. Previous seasons, they were dominant. But last year, 2022, Packers finished 14th in points, 17th in yards per game. And even though their time of possession was good, they had the ball, they just didn't close it out. Rodgers, terrible year, finished 27th in QBR. The year before, he was an MVP. No playoff wins to show for it. Green Bay added another young wide receiver, Jaden Reed out of Michigan State. So now they've got some good wideouts to help Jordan Love, and they have a depth of wideouts. They also got an edge rusher in Lucas Van Ness to give him more time on defense to get to the quarterback. This upcoming season for Green Bay, for me, frankly, is a mystery. Rodgers used to call his decisions a beautiful mystery. This is just a mystery. Nobody truly knows what kind of results Jordan Love will produce, how much more he can develop. Betting on the Packers to win this division is a shot in the dark. You might as well be shooting BBs at the moon. I don't think I would watch the Packers for at least 4 games before you decide to even bet on them in a single game, which brings us to our team totals. As you know, you can bet team totals, over-under on the number of wins a team will finish with in the regular season. And let's start with the Lions. The Lions over-under, 9.5 wins. They were 9-8 last year. The Lions proved they can score with anyone. And they're not competing against any amazing defenses in the NFC North, so it's presumed they should have real results in their own division, especially on offense. Now, there's pressure on Dan Campbell to show he can be the head coach of a genuine contender and not just a bunch of overachievers that end up missing the playoffs. But Detroit, on paper, come on, give it up. They do have a very talented team. Maybe the most talented team in the division. And their betting odds show that. Jared Goff, if he can continue to play like the top 10 QB he did, he's been to a Super Bowl. He's been a number one pick. I've always liked Goff. The Lions had 5 losses of 4 or fewer points last year with that stinky defense, won 8 of their final 10 games. Lions finished 9-8. Tell me they can't win one more game this year? Barring injury, I don't see how the Lions don't at least go 10-7. The Vikings, they're over under 8.5 wins. Interesting. Now they're transitioning to the future. The Vikings are going to be competitive. There's no doubt about it. Kirk Cousins has an argument. He's the best quarterback in the division, and he might have the best receiving core if you add it up top to bottom. Now critics, they're going to go back and point to the point differential. The team's record should have been closer to 500. You go from 13 wins to fewer than 8.5 would be a fall, but it's happened before. Insert your own Raiders commentary right here. The Vikings have won 8 or fewer games in 3 of the last 5 seasons. If the Vikings won 8 and 9, would it surprise me? No. Moving on. The Bears total, 7.5 wins. Everybody wants to tell me how intriguing the Bears are in 2023. Why? Why do you want to keep giving me that speech? I realize Justin Fields is a game breaker. He's dynamic. And that offense at times showed flashes. They won 3 games. Okay? The Bears averaged 23 points a game with Fields in the lineup from week 7 onward. That would have been 13th, ranked 13th for an entire season. It's nothing to sneeze at. It's also not that big a deal because it didn't translate to wins. I think the Bears have a lot to prove to me. Finally, the Green Bay Packers. They're over under 7.5 wins. Now, many teams think when you lose a Hall of Fame quarterback, well, you're going to go off a cliff. But not the Packers. They need to really give Jordan Love and let him figure out if this investment they made 3 years ago that's really turned out to be a fugazi and really sent Aaron Rodgers over the edge, caused him to win another MVP. What do you do? What if you get to the point halfway through the season and Jordan Love can't do it? He hadn't figured it out. Do you trade him for assets? You let him walk in free agencies down the road? This is really a make-or-break situation for Green Bay and Jordan Love. Now, Green Bay does have a solid roster. They lack top-end talent that can take over games and win games on reputation. But it wouldn't be surprising to me to see the Packers look great one week and not so much the following week. And it wouldn't be surprising to me to see the Packers go 7-10. Actually, that would be the first time since 2018 when they only won 7 games. The Packers have not played without Brett Favre or Aaron Rodgers in 32 years. By the way, they went 4-12, and they were 4th in the NFC North last year. I don't think Green Bay gets to 8 wins. Coming up, speaking of numbers, how do you contextualize the massive numbers that people like Justin Herbert and Jaylen Brown and